Welcome, Tina. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. The first time I heard about Venice.ai was at the Decentralized AI conference back in Denver, actually. Because Eric Voorhees was talking about this new project. And so it was super exciting to me because what I've seen at that conference was that right now you are able to run a ChatGPT version basically in a browser, right?
Yep.
And so can you tell us a little bit more about how you got into Web3, how you got into this Venice AI project as a co-founder and a key driver of data security, data provenance, and so all the things we talked about earlier. We'd love to hear your story.
Sure. So I got into Web3 about 8 years ago. I like to say that I'm a reform banker, so I was a transaction banker for big banks like HSBC, soul destroying. And I was working on a number of blockchain proof of concepts, specifically focused on payments and helping, supposedly helping underbanked communities get better access to capital and payments. And after several years of not getting anywhere, I became very frustrated and simultaneously learned about Bitcoin again, right? So I had learned about it in, 2012, and I'll be very honest, I didn't get it. Like, I understood it, but I didn't get how it was gonna actually work. And so several years later, kind of got back into just a little bit more Keynesian economics and understanding kind of wealth distribution. And I thought, I just can't do this anymore. And so I went to work in crypto very intentionally. And at the time, there wasn't much that you could do with tokens other than trade them. So I have led the leadership of a couple of different trading platforms. Like Crypto.com and Binance in Europe.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then, after a while of doing that, I spent the majority of my time arguing with policymakers about what we could and couldn't do and rules that we were breaking that didn't actually exist. And so then I ended up kind of spending the majority of my time in the policy space. And after a few years of that, I just thought, rather than me trying to explain to policymakers what crypto is good for, I really want to go and build something that's tangible that can kind of demonstrate these use cases. And simultaneously, Eric and I were chatting, and I said, I just really want to build something. And he said, well, I'm building this thing. Do you want to come build it with me?
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And tell us a little bit more about the project itself. Because I've played around with it. I mean, Venice.ai, for those who don't know, is pretty cool. Yeah, you showed me a demo earlier, but would love for you to tell the audience what exactly
so
it is.
if you're on your phone or you're on your laptop, super easy, just go to your browser, type in Venice.ai, that's it. You will have a screen pop up that will allow you to put a prompt in. You can ask anything, and then it'll take you to the interface. So we have anonymous users. You never have to log in. You can only use that interface. You can download the interface as a progressive web app and have it on your device all the time. And you can sign up and be a free user or a pro user. And obviously, you get slightly different amounts of inference. So let's say 100 questions a day versus 10,000 questions a day. In the image models, you can create pretty cool images with the free service. But with the pro service, you can create high-res images. You have a lot more styles you can choose from. You can change the system prompt in as a pro user, which is pretty compelling in that you can tell the AI how you want it to talk to you. And you can give it negative prompts as well. So for example, if you say, speak to me like adult, don't deliver me any kind of woke bullshit. I mean, really, you can be very, very specific. Talk to me only as if you're Stephen Hawking. Speak to me in a way that, makes me feel good about myself and bolsters my confidence.
I love that.
Tell me that I'm beautiful, and it will do that regardless of what you ask it. So you can kind of assign personalities to different personalities or personas rather within the AI. So that's kind of what you can do, and I highly encourage you to play with it. It can be very fun. You should see, although this morning, I think there's something might be wrong. Greg, I need to talk to you about what I think is wrong. But we've launched a web-enabled model this week. And what is cool about that is we only use open source models. So you were talking about Hugging Face earlier.
Yeah.
So we don't use any black box type model. We don't have our own model. We don't fine-tune models. We literally just connect to the best, what we think are the best open source models available. And then we try and do something on our system prompt on the back end, which we are happy to make public, to reduce the amount of any type of inbuilt censorship or bias that might be in there to make it kind of as uncensored as possible. Now, we're using 2 versions of Meta's Llama 3, which was published late 2021. So there's obviously a gap between that time frame until today. So having a web-enabled model basically allows the AI to go to the internet, get the answer, make all those computations, come back, provide you with an answer like you would have Googled, but with, instead of a list of answers, like the answer, and then cites the sources. So it's pretty nice. You can kind of see where it got its information from.
That's really awesome because you can run different models, get different input. Like, you can basically test with different sources. Well, how do you, like you mentioned it earlier, you mentioned Akash, but I want to pick on it because one of the most interesting things to hear is that you're actually leveraging decentralized infrastructure. And can you talk a little bit about how you leverage that? And then, you know, there's the compute side and the storage side. Maybe we can talk about the compute first, and then maybe talk a little bit about the data challenges that you're seeing.
Yeah, so we use decentralized compute very specifically because we do not want to run a centralized application. Venice is meant to be an alternative to something like ChatGPT for a number of reasons. It's private, and we can get into that when we talk about the architecture. It's uncensored, as I mentioned. And equally, it's permissionless. So by running on decentralized compute, by choosing a progressive web app instead of having an app in the Apple Store, we've made some very considered changes or decisions to ensure that, you know, if the U.S. government said, look, we don't like what you're doing, shut it off, like, it can't be shut off.
Yeah. And then...
Right, Greg? It can't be shut off. Okay.
No. This is the power of, like, decentralized technologies, that you can actually crowdsource, you can leverage all these resources that are out there without it's compromising basically the users inside the users IP. Because we were talking about, you know, today ChatGPT is so widely utilized. I use it on a daily basis, but I've seen examples where users or friends of mine are actually customizing it, telling it everything about themselves to a point where the machine actually knows you better than you know yourself. And so that opens up a whole other challenge here, is like, how do we manage private data sets? How do we manage this, like, you know, private IP? I call it private IP, but it's basically like the IP about yourself, about the data sets that you sort of share with these public ChatGPT versions. How do we address that? And you've kind of addressed it to a point, because you're saying, look, it's permissionless, it's running in the browser, it's running on your laptop. You get the real answer. You don't get, you know, sort of a controlled version of it. But where do you see this going? Where do you see some of the data challenges over time? And you kind of mentioned earlier when we were talking about some businesses, you could see, you know, businesses run some of these versions locally. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I think that the primary thing to consider when you're using a centralized, you know, black box type of application, and I would say that ChatGPT fits within that. I use it too for certain things, and you know, it's early, it's market leading, it works, right? And I think that we are used to, in a Web 2 environment, giving away something for a service in return, and that what that something is our holiday photos and our location information and all of this, you know, kind of metadata that can be, you know, collated to provide a view about who we are. This is very, very different. This is actually who you are. So the photos that you put on Instagram with the filters and the smiling face of, your daughter's baptism. That's what you want people to see. But if you're having existential conversations, essentially with yourself, and you're exploring new ideas and how you feel about things and what you actually think about things, those are conversations that we maybe have with a friend or a priest or a therapist or our parents or a spouse. But oftentimes, those are those private things that we only have those conversations with ourselves. So it's not your data that you're sharing with OpenAI. Yeah. It's you. It's who you are. It's the essence of you. And that information will be tied to your identity forever. And it will be made available to whomever pays OpenAI for the right or the use of that data. If a government requests that data, they'll hand it over. I can't hand over that data because I don't have it. I don't have to protect it because I don't have it. I don't have to store it in a certain way because I do not have it. And I do not want it. It is none of my business. So I think that's one place to start, right? And then I do think that as we progress and as this scales, yes, there may be requirements for, especially at an enterprise level, to be able to have private data lakes or private inference, and that will have to be stored in some way. But I do know that there are companies, huge companies today, that forbid the use of services like OpenAI within their, corporate mainframe ecosystem, their tech stack, because they don't want their data being scraped for their IP and for their kind of competitive intelligence, right? So there is a demand for services like this.
That makes sense. Because you were saying, I think what we're seeing right now in decentralized, if you look at how, because there are some investors that I've talked to that don't believe decentralized compute has a product market fit. And I was laughing at it because, no, you're clearly seeing the adoption of it. It's more than just a shortage of GPUs. There's actually a desire beyond that, like what you were just describing. It's the choice. Two, it's cost. Obviously, it's always cost. But three, it's also a way to can I leverage resources that are not controlled by some central entity? But where do you see this going? Because you started in May, right? I think you released the software only in May. You have how many users today?
Almost 10,000.
Wow, that's amazing. And those users are just doing inferencing in their browsers. Is that correct? And, we're not seeing training yet, right, in decentralized compute. Do you see that happening in the future? And do you believe, maybe you can talk a little bit about the regulatory, because you have a very regulatory background. What do you see is going to happen there?
Yeah, so I think that what we have seen, California is one example, but federally in the US, and absolutely in Europe. Europe loves to regulate. I always say it's their national export product.
GDPR?
Just at any type of rate, they love it all, but certainly GDPR is one. Is the models themselves, right? And so there is a lot of concern that there will be a desire to regulate essentially free speech, which is open source technology, open source models, which makes absolutely no sense. But if you have, some of the major kind of big tech players on the other side spending a lot of time in Washington saying, you can trust us, and we're going to keep doing what we're doing, so let us do that. But this open source stuff, this is dangerous, which is completely crazy. That's totally ass backwards, if you ask me, because as we all know, you can go in and look at how that model has been trained, on what information, where the fine tuning has been added, to what purpose. And in some of the bigger tech models, we just have no idea. So I do think from a transparency perspective, from a trust perspective, and certainly from a scaling perspective, the ability for us to fine-tune models in a decentralized way is really important. I don't think anybody's cracked that yet. But we certainly aren't going to be able to unless we have that decentralized infrastructure in place. And so that's happening now.
Yeah,
and it works really well.
It does. I agree. And I mean, we're seeing, fine tuning happening with public data sets. That was very clear. At the Decentralized AI conference in Austin, it was very much a discussion topic in one of the workshops where people are yep, we can already do this today, but one of the discussions was more around how do you safely manage private data sets. And I think, there's some technologies here today that are going to be presented that will help with not only the management of it, but the encryption, the security part of it, and then also running some of the on-ramps locally on premises with where the data is actually currently stored today. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that for people like us in this room, kind of those technical implications are really important, and these are the people that are going to build this. One of the challenges that I had the entire time I was in crypto was, what is this good for anyway?
Yeah,
A senator says, but what is this good
Totally.
for? Why do I care about this? And so I think what is fundamentally different about AI to kind of any type of decentralized activity or decentralized, ways of doing things has come before is that this is net new, right? We're not trying to reinvent money. We're not trying to reinvent compute, right? We're trying to ensure that we start as we intend to continue. And I think that AI is potentially the biggest benefit and maybe existential threat to humanity if we get this wrong. So if I look out 10 years from now and what we've allowed to happen to society with Web 2 social media, for example, is allowed to happen in AI, it's not just about getting annoying, pop-ups and, talking to your friend and then seeing that come up in your Google search and you're like, okay, I know I'm being monitored somewhere, and you kind of get over that. This is the ability to incept you to actually believe something different than you do. And to challenge your thinking in a way to potentially change what you believe, because you have
That's pretty powerful.
truth machines, telling you,
Yeah.
well, this is the answer to this question, or this is what you should be thinking. And oh, you asked that question. You really shouldn't be thinking that. I mean, I think it's really compelling if you play with some of these apps. It's not just I can't generate that image for you. It's I can't generate that image for you, and you really shouldn't be thinking about this anyway. I mean, it's incredibly paternal. So I think we need to keep that in mind, that it's not just about kind of like what's the next evolution of how we do things, but like why? Why is this important? Why are we doing this? And what world do we want to live in? It's not just about giving away our data anymore. It's deeply personal now.
Well said. Wow. What maybe the last question, because I know we're running a little bit over time, but I really enjoy this conversation. Where do you see the market in a few years, and what do you recommend? Like, let's say in 3 years from now, maybe that's already too far out. But and what do you recommend people in our community, in our ecosystem, to do to help build the vision that you set forward?
Yeah, so I think that one of the things that we're very focused on is ensuring that every decision we make is a very considered, intentional decision. And when you're kind of building this tech stack in a completely private way, as permissionless and decentralized as possible, there are decisions that we make, like even down to the email system that we use, right? Like we're not on Gmail. We're not using AWS for anything. We're not. Yeah. I mean, it's like as if a decentralized option exists, if a decentralized option that we can pay for with crypto exists, forget about it. We're there. And so to do that, though, I'll be honest with you. It's a little fiddly, right?
Yeah,
it's not like you just flip the switch and you turn on all your services. And it's, starting up a company in that way, you need to expect that there's going to be a little bit of friction and just stick with it, because if us who are early don't, then we're not going to kind of pave the way to make this easier for other people to build in this way.
Awesome. No, thank you. I think, I think that's a good way of ending this, because it is not easy, right, to adopt all these newer technologies. And I get the same question too, like, Stefan, why are you even doing this? Why are we all doing this? This isn't just like some Ponzi scheme that you're working on. I'm like, no, because there's a much bigger vision behind it, because we truly believe we should be in control as a user of our own
I listened
IP.
to a podcast about a year ago. I was on a plane, and I always feel like if you're listening to a podcast, like, inner ear, like somehow it's like jacked into your brain. So it was really listening to it. And I don't know if anybody knows who Kara Swisher is, but it was a podcast she was doing about Elon Musk, and somebody said to her, Kara, why don't you just call him and tell him to do X? And she said, I'm not going to do that.
He did X, by the
And
way.
I know, and they asked her, why not? Because she apparently knows him, and she said, because I'm going to be dead soon, and that is a waste of my time. And they were like, wow. And she said, no, I mean it. I'm making this up. Maybe it was 60. She said, I'm 60. We're all going to be dead soon, and I want to spend my time meaningfully, and that's not a meaningful way to spend my time.
Wow.
So that's why
Powerful.
we do this.
Awesome. All right. Well, with that, I appreciate you coming, and thank you for the great chat.
Thanks.
If you have any other questions, please meet Teana after the fact, and yeah.